Welcome everyone to the Race to Zero webinar series, Uniting Asia to Combat Climate Change. Today's session focuses on the theme Towards Clean Energy. Before we begin, a bit of housekeeping. Our format for this webinar is that we will let all our speakers present first, and then we will have a Q&A session at the end. However, feel free to post any questions or comments you may have at any point during the session. We will collate them and have our speakers address them during the Q&A. We also request you to indicate the name of the speaker to whom you're addressing your question. With that out of the way, let me welcome Peter Thompson to open the session. Peter is the East Asia Energy Business Leader and Infrastructure Director for Arup, based in Hong Kong. He has over 34 years of experience in the management, design, and implementation of major energy infrastructure projects across a number of Asian countries to facilitate the transition toward cleaner forms of energy generation and reductions in demand through the implementation of energy efficient solutions.
Okay, thank you very much, Abigail. And it's a pleasure for me to welcome you all today to what is our second webinar for this webinar series, the Race to Zero. And today's event is the first of this morning. So that's the race towards clean energy. And it's part of the sort of pre-COP event to the UN Climate Change Conference for COP26, which takes place next month in November. So without further ado, I'll just, sorry, my slide's not moving. Okay, so as I mentioned, the COP26 is occurring next month in November, and it's I'm proud to announce that Arups are the sustainability consultant for that event, and that's the reason why we are sharing some of our knowledge today in order to sort of promote that event, but also sort of raise awareness for some of the issues that are sort of close to our hearts and the sort of the theme of our business strategy throughout the whole company. So just I'll start with a few sort of sobering messages. My first one is an overview. I'm sure you're familiar with the events that are going on in the world at the moment with climate change. There's many sort of incidents occurring across the world, including Australia and India and America with flooding and on all sorts of events like that. And a lot of that's being caused by the carbon dioxide emissions into the air, and energy is actually one of the biggest responsible parties for that, with over 76% of man-made emissions of carbon dioxide coming from the energy industry itself. So it really is an area that we need to focus on, and one that really needs to be addressed over the coming decades up to 2050. So just to give a bit of background, I'm sure you remember back in 2015, we had COP21. That was really the start of this climate change action, where 131 countries signed up to the Paris Agreement. They were pledging to reach net zero by 2050. So I thought it would be a good idea to have a look at where we've got to since that event. And if you look at the slide on the right, you can see a thermometer scale there. The agreement was that these countries would try to limit the temperature over this next century, that's up to 2100, to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. And as you can see from a thermometer where we are now, we're actually used 1.2 degrees of that 1.5 degrees already. So we've only got 0.3 degrees left of that target before we reach that goal. So, you know, if you're considering we're at 2020, that's really not a great performance. If you actually look at the pledges and targets that have actually made during that conference, the reality is that we're likely to achieve a temperature increase over this next century of anything between 1.9 and 3 degrees, or an average of sort of 2.4. But if you then look at those pledges and see how many of those are actually put into current policy, the situation is even worse. We're looking at temperature rise of something between 2.1 and 3.9 degrees, so an average of 2.9, which is really, you know, double the original target. So if you look at why that is and where that's come from, this is data from the Climate Action Tracker. You'll note that actually still 84.3% of the energy that we use comes from hydrocarbons, and that's split between oil, coal, and gas, and only 15.7% is geared towards low carbon. So really, if you look back, 6 years when the commitments were made, the progress has really been slow, and it's really imperative that we must act now. And I'm sort of confident, looking at the way the market's moving, that we are sort of getting some change now occurring. You can see across Asia in places like Japan, Korea, China, that they're moving into offshore wind. So I'm sort of very confident that this decade will be known as the decade of renewables, and hopefully the many countries in the world will sort of adopt the same sort of policies and move towards this net carbon zero by 2050. So without further ado, I hope my fellow speakers will be able to elaborate on some of this. So I'll hand back to Abigail, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
I'd like to share with you, of course, what's going on in the Philippines, so that we have a good idea of what's happening here in Manila. And Peter put it aptly when he showed the global stage, no, on where we are in terms of energy resource utilization. Let me show you what we aspired for way back in 2010. We launched the National Renewable Energy Program, and we said from 5,400 megawatts of RE, we will try to reach or add up to 15,000 by 2030. That's an additional 10,000 megawatts in a span of 20 years until 2030. However, we go to, after 10 years of the launch of the National Renewable Energy Program, this is where we are now. You look at the 2010 data, the diagram that you see now. In 2010, renewables occupied around 33.2% of the total generating capacity in the Philippines. But unfortunately, if you look at the bar in 2020, despite all our efforts, right, and all the rules that we had issued, we actually went the reverse. We are now down to 29% installed capacity for renewables. And it's even worse when it comes to power generation, where once upon a time, we reached almost 32% in 2009. You now go to 2019, we're now down to 20%. So we went the other way, the opposite way for the Philippines. And while we had a target of 10,000 megawatts by 2030, we had only added, unfortunately, around 2,300 megawatts after 10 years, or a measly 221 billion peso investment in renewables. So obviously, we are lagging behind. No? You will see from here that, unfortunately, despite all our efforts, no, and obviously we need to do more, we only added 2,000 megawatts of new capacities for renewables. No? And that means we have relied more on imported conventional fuel. So whereas in 2008, we reached energy self-sufficiency of almost 67%, in 2019, sadly, we are down to 46%. That means the Philippines now is importing more conventional fuel. That's not good for us, especially with how the market has behaved in the past 2 to 3 years. So having said that, on the one hand, the Philippines is a thriving economy. We continue to grow despite COVID. And in fact, the government still sees a growth in demand, no, in terms of demand for power. So in the next 30 years, no, 20 years, by 2040, the Philippines will need an additional 43,000 megawatts of new capacities. This is for the entire Philippines and per island. Luzon, we need 24,000, Visayas 9,000, and Mindanao 10,000. This means we continue to need power in the Philippines, and therefore we need to build more capacities. So what does the future hold? Fortunately, in the Philippines, as I mentioned, we have a lot of these laws and rules in place already. We have the Renewable Energy Act, which is a law that provides for both fiscal and non-fiscal incentives. For the fiscal incentives, I call this a buffet. We have everything in here. You have a 7-year income tax holiday. You import your RE equipment duty-free for the first 10 years. When you sell your renewable energy power, it's zero-rated VAT. So all these incentives are provided under the law in the Philippines. And it's not only fiscal that is provided. No? So after you finish your 7-year income tax holiday, you only pay 10% corporate tax rate. compared to the 25% for regular corporations. So aside from your fiscal incentives, the law also provides for non-fiscal, and we have a lot of these. We started off with the feed-in tariff program way back in 2012. We were successful. Now, when we launched this in 2012, by 2016, we were able to add 1,400 megawatts of new renewable energy capacities across different technologies. Bulk of it is occupied by solar. We had wind. We had a little bit of hydropower, run-of-river, and we had biomass. The biomass plants, in fact, built even more in 2019 when the FIT was extended, an additional 350 megawatts. Now, aside from the FIT, of course, in 2017, for a period of 1 year where I sat as chairman of the National Renewable Energy Board, we finished all the rules that are pending, all the policy mechanisms. What are these? We have the RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standards, both for on-grid and off-grid areas. We also issued the green energy option. This is the net metering. We did the RPS, which is a mandate for all utilities to sign up power supply agreements with renewable energy. And the RPS now mandates all utilities. In the next year or so, you will see from this calculation that all our utilities will need to execute power supply agreements with renewable energy suppliers, failing which, unfortunately, under the law, they go to jail. So this is a mandate. This is not a choice anymore. So with this mandate, we expect more RE suppliers to come here and offer their capacities to utilities under a competitive selection process that is currently the set of rules for entering into power supply agreements in the Philippines. This is just the RPS. We also have the RPS for off-grid areas, those islands that are not connected. We have seen some of these projects already implemented by the National Power Corporation in some of these islands. In fact, we have seen these hybrid systems, the combined diesel hydro systems that are actually cheaper than the bunker fuel currently being used by these islands. So aside from RPS, of course, we finished and issued the Green Energy Option Program. If you are a consumer with at least 100 kilowatt of peak demand, you can contract directly with any RE supplier. We have seen a lot of these for the last 2 to 3 years. Resorts, hotels, hospitals. Now, they're all now signing up power supply agreements with renewable energy suppliers because now they offer cheaper rates compared to the conventional fuel. So the Green Energy Option Program has, in fact, led to more installation, albeit in small capacities. Not only that, we finished the RE market rules, the RM rules. For every megawatt hour of renewable energy that you generate, you will also receive one renewable energy certificate. That certificate can form as part of the compliance of those who are mandated under the RPS to secure power from renewables. So we have this market already in place, in the hope that more and more RE suppliers will build power plants in the Philippines. And finally, of course, the DOE is looking at amending the National Renewable Energy Program, where once upon a time in 2010, we said our target will be 35% by 2030. This time, the government, the DOE, plans to target 50% renewable energy in the power mix by 2040. So how do we do that? Of course, there are several ways. We have the RPS, and the RPS also, which currently sits at 1% of net electricity sales of each utility, is currently being revised as well. They're going to increase the target so that more and more RE power supply contracts will be entered into. There is also this Green Energy Auction Program that the DOE is currently looking at in the hopes that we will have more renewable energy power plants getting built. This program will be a bidding program, hopefully participated in by more players. And as of the latest draft that I've seen, it has been revised to look like the FIT program. So hopefully this will also encourage more investors. Now, we have the RE Trust Program. We have the bidding for geothermal and hydro sites. So for the last 10 years, because of all these rules, we have created a market for the renewable energy industry. Those suppliers can enter into power supply agreements with the utilities and the electric cooperatives. Those suppliers can also negotiate the Green Energy Option Program supply contracts with all these contestable customers, the retail customers. Soon, we will have the Green Energy Auction Program, another round of it. And of course, under the wholesale electricity spot market, all renewables are at priority dispatch. So all these are now currently in place. The next question, of course, is what has happened to the Philippines? No, despite all these rules in place, why have we gone the opposite way? No, one thing needs to be done. Hopefully, the next government needs to declare that we need to go renewables. We need to declare that renewables is the preferred source of energy in the Philippines.
My favorite topic since the beginning of sustainability. It's about the paradigm shift to clean energy transition using waste as one resource, creating zero waste and sustainable communities. As an introduction, we have to know that, we should know also that the world generates 2.1 billion tons of municipal solid waste annually. 33% of that is extremely and conservatively not managed in environmentally safe manner. Worldwide generation per capita is 0.74 kilogram, but also ranges widely from 0.11 to 0.54 kilogram. Before going further, I will want to discuss and inform you about what happened with the John Cum case in the Philippines. During the time of President Ramos, he issued a proclamation creating an executive committee to oversee the development of waste to energy in the Philippines, the first of its kind, supposed to be. There were bidding conducted, and the winning bidder was John Cum Environmental Corporation. A contract was signed between the Philippine government and John Cum for 25 years and was expected to implement a long-term waste management plan and the installation operation of an incineration facility that will burn about 3,000 tons of municipal solid waste per day. It was submitted for approval to then President Ramos during his last years as president. Then President Joseph Estrada refused to sign approval because of opposition regarding the environmental impact of the project. There were issues surrounding the implementation, and it would require implementation of civil courts. And it went up to the Supreme Court to decide the issues, particularly on the non-availability of the landfill in San Mateo and also the technology that is being used. The first waste energy project was put into back burner until the Supreme Court promulgated its decision on certiorari filed by the proponents. The Supreme Court ruled on the issue of incineration. It says that to consider Section 20 of the Cleaner Act prohibiting all forms of incineration would render the phrase which process emits poisonous and toxic fumes would mean useless surpluses, which could not have been the intention of the legislator, saying that our learned legislature even took pains to defy Section 5 of the Cleaner Act, which is poisonous and toxic fumes are. Well, Section 20 does not absolutely prohibit incineration as a mode of waste disposal. Rather, only those burning processes which emit poisonous and toxic fumes are banned. Another case involves the Cebu City Waste Energy Project, which was the first waste energy project of green energy solutions. Cebu City has a 25-hectare Inayawan landfill as a depository of garbage collected daily from its people. And there was an integrated waste management project, which was approved by the City Council in 2005. It was registered under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change as a clean development mechanism with complete commitment from foreign investors for the establishment of the 25-year waste management program with the waste to energy aspect. The project is envisioned to have three components: 100% reuse of the 2 million residual waste of the landfill, remediation and closure of the landfill, 100% disposal and reuse of the 600 tons of waste generated daily, adopting a waste to energy scheme. The proponent of the Cebu City project Greenergy solution had offered a joint venture with the City Council of Cebu that will provide lasting solution to the city waste management project. That will also clear the Inayawan landfill of the 2 million tons, which was considered as residual waste. It was a zero waste solution. At the same time, it would generate clean energy. Greenergy solution will be using anaerobic digestion conversion process, and it would generate clean energy under power purchase agreement with the off-taker. However, with the change of elected officials in 2007, the project was not implemented because the newly elected official resented the earlier agreement, and the new city council required to conduct another bidding, and they want a new proponent. It was known that there was a controversy in the adoption of the waste conversion technology, which accordingly, we have identified anaerobic digestion as an incineration. Because of so much politics, which is green energy, which I am the president. So let's think about it. What about waste? Well, of course, we know it's loss of value. We have lost resources and loss of money. Philippines is generating about 1466 million tons per year. However, these are the waste regulations in the Philippines. We have Republic Act 9003, Republic Act 8749, Republic Act 9513, which is the Renewable Energy Law, Republic Act 7160, and also Republic Act 9729, which is the Climate Change Act. Republic Act 9513 provides in section 24, which says that there will be an adoption of waste to energy technologies, and it shall be with practicable encourage adoption of waste to energy facilities, but not limited to biogas system. So that it would mean that waste to energy is also one of a renewable energy resource. However, there are limitations on this as to the use of technologies. The renewable energy law only provides processes like anaerobic digestion, fermentation, and gasification, but it also stated among others. The word among others has been an issue with under the Waste to Energy Act of 2020, which is Senate Bill 17889, which intends to establish national as an energy policy and regulatory, and provides for regulatory framework for facilities utilizing waste to energy facilities. The proposed bill enacted will establish a systematic ecological solid waste management program in order to ensure protection of public health and environment, and strengthen the government commitment to solid waste avoidance and volume reduction by supplementing waste to energy technology. Also, once enacted, the waste to energy facilities would encourage the development and utilization of environmentally sustainable new technologies in resource recovery, resources conservation, processing, treatment, and disposal waste. If implemented, DNR and DOE will be the two government agencies will be involved. DNR will be involved in providing regulatory framework as to segregation, transfer, storage, transport, waste treatment. And DOE will provide energy production, development, distribution, framework, and regulation. Why materials recovery and energy facility and not waste to energy? We are proposing for another name. Because for your information, there are about 200 opposition to the new bill and Senate. And they have been telling and exposing that the new act will use incineration to convert the waste from the waste like the hospital waste, waste. So accordingly, they are invoking the provision in the Clean Air Act that incineration is prohibited. But however, what is all about incineration? As to gasification or anaerobic digestion, well, a flame is present. Incineration is the burning in an oxygen-rich environment. It provides, or say, it emits toxins, or say, dioxins and furans, comparatively much space to perform incineration. Incineration requires open system and it has low temperature in operating. Gasification, there will be syngas that is produced, required is oxygen, the oxygen deficient atmosphere does not provide surrounding with a fuels, and there are no dioxins and no toxic fumes. It is a complete self-storage unit. Waste management, integrating with waste to energy is a circular economy technology, and it involves reuse, recycling, recovery materials, and responsible manufacture that support development of new industries and jobs. Also reduce emission and increasing efficient use of natural resources, including energy, water, material. In the Philippines, waste management under the Philippine Republic Act number 9003, there are two priority activities. One, when it comes to waste management, one is the closure and the establishment of material recovery facility. The alternative, or say, our proposal is to be on priority waste management facility that would have energy recovery in order to not to lose the materials that are still usable under the concept of circular economy. When we talk of when we are going to talk of circular economy, we intend to have drivers in an integrated MRE manner. One, these are the drivers. The participants, RE developers, LGUs, communities, technology providers, suppliers, and funders. Agreement, memorandum agreement with the LGU for a secured BizPack for 25 years, a power sales agreement, and also 25-year connection agreement. Those technologies should be allowed under the Philippine laws, and also in accordance with the provision of the Clean Air Act. Capacity will be depend on the total volume of MSW delivered to facility. We intend to have a scalable facility. Feedstock should be mixed and segregated in SW, but not rubber and plastic, more particularly agricultural waste and waste. The project is a 25-year facility. We have 18 to 24 months development. Of course, the government support will be income tax holiday for 7 years. It's a renewable energy resource. All these incentives will be available. On the screen are the summary of waste analysis and characterization study conducted by Greenergy Solutions in one city in the Philippines, which is 56% or 56% is agricultural or say organic, composed of lumber, timber, and market waste. Plastics only 8%, paper is 16%, metal is 6%, garden waste is 8%, glass is 3%, others or still 3%. So we are more concerned on the 56%. There are the challenges for development of MREF or waste to energy project in the Philippines. There was no clear legal institutional framework for an LGU initiated project. Political interventions are hindering the local governments in imposing fees. It is about the issue of willingness to pay to take this. There are very few players. Politics control the waste management sector. There is lack of proven technology and acceptable waste to energy technology in the Philippines. Also, very important is there's a lack of political will. Our business model is we are going to put up a community-based SWM energy project. It is comprehensive, but still looks simple on utilizing numerous inputs. This will include MSW composition, the heating value, beside power output, and other key elements. This will also involve capital investment, debt service per ton, operation and maintenance costs per ton per revenue, and powers offtake agreement. For a proponent, for a waste to energy MRA project, at the start of the project, the risks associated with the implementation should be identified, quantified, and allocated to both the LGU and the proponent. This will involve the regulatory institutional frameworks, environment, technology, financial. waste collection, conversion, and political waste. The main players and strategy, it will be the government, both national and local, haulers, landfill operators, waste conversion technology owners, waste operator, energy sector. But please know that energy sector is a very important as key player because we need an update. We need to sell the power that we have generated. All these key players require close coordination, especially during the operation. The strategy utilizing our renewable energy economic aspect are considered to adopt environmental issues at the aim of eco-efficiency. Government policies favorable to MREF or waste to energy must be created and its recognition as renewable energy resource. There must be a preference to waste to energy schemes, and it should be on top of the solid one management hierarchy. We want to emphasize creation or development of waste to energy or MREF should be on top of the solid waste management hierarchy. As of today, we have existing MRF biomass waste to energy project in the Philippines. We have 5 in the operating now. These are all materials recovery and energy facility using biodegradable organic waste. We are still constructing 2, and we have already recently commissioned 1 in Bulacan. My friends, let's save the environment. We must have clean energy. Iligtas natin ang mga bata. Thank you.
Energy professional, she has led several public and private partnerships projects to drive clean energy transitions in India, UK, Middle East, and the US. Policy development, energy system modeling, and technology assessment are her forte. Let me now give the floor to Ms. Prachi Gupta.
Thank you so much, Abigail. I hope my screen is visible. Okay, great. So I'll be talking about resilient and low carbon energy systems. And when we talk about resilient energy systems, we generally refer to the ability of the system to provide and maintain acceptable level of energy service in the event of changes to the energy system and to risks such as climate risks, physical risks, cyber risks, etc. In the beginning, Peter briefly highlighted a couple of examples of climate impact. Following up on that, in Jan 2021, a blast of cold weather in Northeast Asia, combined with a shortage of ships for transporting gas, ignited a steep rise in LNG prices. Even a couple of weeks back, the Asia Pacific spot LNG prices hit a fresh record with the JKM benchmarker surpassing $50 per MMBTU for the first time ever since the last 20 years. In Feb 2021, as you can see, after a winter storm, the state's electric grid operator lost control of the power supply, leaving 4.5 million customers without electricity and some for several days. It had cascading effects on other services which are reliant upon electricity, such as drinking water treatment and medical services. So there's no doubt that climate change has influenced the means and extremes of weather throughout the world. In the near future, extreme weather, including storms, cold weather, hurricanes, extreme heat, and wildfires, are expected to become the new normal, posing an increasing risk to our energy systems. And the entire value chain is under threat. This is an example of what happened to the T&D system of Florida's utility when Irma hit in 2017. And in this table, you can see in brief the impact of changes in climate, such as rising global temperatures on the electricity value chain, generation, transmission and distribution, and demand. So on generation, there's decreased efficiency of plants. On T&D, the operational limits of the system are affected. And on the demand side, there'll be increased cooling and refrigeration demand. Similarly, there are impact of cold spells and droughts and other extreme events on the entire value chain of power systems. And third, I just wanted to touch on this. With increasing digitalization, our energy systems are prone to cyber attacks. And this is an example of how the largest petroleum pipeline of the US, which supplies about half of the East Coast gasoline, was hacked. It went down for several days, causing gas panic buying shortages and price spikes in some states. And yet another example of cyber security vulnerabilities was the cyber attack on India's largest nuclear plant, where indicatively a large amount of data from administrative network was stolen. And imagine if the critical systems are attacked, it can have physical effects, theft of nuclear materials, or in the worst case, a reactor meltdown. So these are some examples of risks that our current energy system is prone to: climate risk, physical, natural risks, cyber risks, to name a few. To address some of these risks, climate risks in particular, what we need is a flexible and resilient decarbonized energy system. We're already witnessing a radical transformation in the energy sector, from a centralized to a decentralized energy system with increased penetration of renewables and cleaner technologies. And the decarbonization has resulted in few changes in the power system, such as less dispatchable and more asynchronous generation. In such a scenario, if climate resilience is built into the energy system, it will not only provide a cost-effective solution for energy security, but will also support delivery of sustainable development goals. So what we generally call as the 3 pillars of energy Trilama. So for example, in California, where wildfires are a major threat, good forest maintenance can minimize the cost of wildfire on transmission and distribution lines. In Zambia, where only 30 to 40% of population has access to electricity, in Feb 2016, when the water level of the Caribbean Dam, which is the biggest electricity source in Zambia, it dropped by 88%. It prompted blackouts. So adopting climate resilience strategies such as installing microgrids would help ensure reliable access to electricity. So to understand what is needed to build resilient and low carbon energy systems, let us take the case of Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico suffered the longest blackout in US history when it was hit by Hurricane Maria and Hurricane Irma in September 2017. The island's power grid system and critical infrastructure was destroyed, and it took 11 months to recover power in all communities. This island-wide destruction of energy infrastructure triggered an ambitious post-disaster recovery plan to completely rebuild Puerto Rico's electric power system, the Build Back Better plan, with an aim to rebuild a more resilient power grid that is capable of surviving an upper category 4 event. So some of the specific technologies and strategies that have been involved in the plan are, first is the building of microgrids on critical infrastructure. So these are the 8 islandable microgrids which are planned to be built for resiliency to support critical infrastructures in highly populated areas and remote communities in case of blackout. Then modernizing the T&D through smart grids, combining CHP systems, implementing vegetation management, underground power lines, especially in high windy areas, and then, of course, increasing battery storage and on-site backup generation. So not only is the intent on strengthening grid resilience, the plan also aims at a more aggressive energy transition to renewable energy by aiming to reach RE penetration by 50% by 2035 and 100% by 2050, mainly through solar and wind. And prior to the hurricane, the goal was to reach 20% RE by 2035. And quickly, I think it's important to highlight the role of the communities. So the plan pays special attention to remote communities to help them quickly recover their power from a disaster. Then to promote self-sufficiency, it aims at setting up an independent regulator, a flexible regulatory framework, and an integrated resource plan with innovation as the key component, and involvement and ownership of non-traditional players. So for example, the energy cooperatives and municipalities in the energy transition. So this is one example of customer-centric and resilient energy planning. And there are many emerging examples. Here, it's a quick summary of the emerging resilience approaches that are reshaping the power system at each stage of the value chain. So modernized transmission systems, which can be potentially black-started through utility scale renewables, thus reducing the reliance on upstream fuel supply chains. And then grid modernization, For example, emerging resilience interventions are the autonomous energy grids, which can power delivery from distributed scale resources during an outage, and from demand side, behind the meter systems with appropriate storage technologies that are powering individual homes when the broader grid is de-energized. So in summary, I would say these are the 7 key elements. There are 7 key elements that are needed to build resilient and low carbon energy systems. So 1, resilient infrastructure. 2, diversified supply mix as well as the supply chain. 3rd, continued innovation and R&D. And 4th, from the policy perspective, prioritization of resilience as a core element of the energy and climate plans. And 5th, participation of private players. This is equally critical. I mean, it will also help unlock new investment in the sector. And here, the example of Connecticut Green Bank is exemplary. I mean, for leveraging private investment, and even the New Jersey Energy Resilience Bank has emulated this model. And 6th, a consumer-centric approach, as we saw in the case of Puerto Rico. And lastly, collaboration. So this is extremely critical. For example, in South Asia, it provides a tremendous scope. South Asia could seize the opportunity to collaborate under the larger coalition for disaster resilient infrastructure that was launched by India's Prime Minister. It offers opportunities for nations that are still in the early stages of infrastructure development to learn from other countries about best practices for regulations, financial incentives, and governance. So I think time will be defined by how we prepare and build resilient and low carbon energy systems that can cope up with the present and future risks. Thank you so much.
Clients. Our spectrum of services cover 3 major fields, namely advisory, master planning, and infrastructure or engineering. For the energy sector, we cater to renewable energy, energy storage, hydrogen solutions, and natural gas, among others. In this presentation, we will be showing the Philippines' energy picture and reflect a case study of how Arup supported Singapore in their efforts to transition to net zero, and later on, of course, the Philippines' efforts to our NDC goals. So as the world becomes more and more aware of Mother Earth's call for sustainability, we in Arup would like to share to our clients our best practices and lessons learned based on our world-class experience. So the following slides will show what the present energy situation in the Philippines is and the particular aspects to where we can make improvements. Afterwards, we'll be sharing a base case scenario where Arup helped deliver and drive sustainability in Singapore. So the Philippines is one of several countries who are dependent on coal for energy production. Up until last year, our energy sector shows a steady increase in generation from coal sources. From 2019 to 2020 alone, the increase in the energy production of coal sources is about 2%. That's on top of the fact that the energy mix is largely contributed by coal plants at more than 50% already. So this slide shows the country's CO2 emissions. As you can see, our CO2 emissions are constantly increasing. The bottom graph shows the major contributors as electricity and transport. Some may argue that these are due to economic growth, but in Arup, we believe that a country can still be progressive without harming the environment. All over the globe, countries are finding ways to control greenhouse gas emissions. First world countries have taken the first steps to transition to their energy sources to renewable energy. Electric vehicles are promoted for use, and sustainability has been a constant part of design and engineering. Arup has been in the forefront of this change, and we align our company missions and visions to bringing sustainability in all that we do. As an example, We will go through the involvement of Arup Singapore in the transition and their efforts to help the government strategize and achieve the country's net zero targets. This graph shows a comparison between the carbon situation before and after the application of the country's nationally determined contributions, or NDC. Singapore's NDC target is to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions from 2030 to 2050 by 50%. Arup is commissioned by the Singapore Energy Market or Energy Market Authority, or EMA, to model the country's generation fleet to deal with their reduction targets and manage an increasing penetration of renewable energy. So using the Plexus market modeling tool, Arup modeled several generation fleet scenarios to simulate impacts of different technologies and their respective parameters on the energy trilemma, i.e. cost, reliability, and sustainability. Singapore has identified 4 energy transition switches, namely natural gas, solar, green imports, and alternative fuels. Arup is playing a critical role in enabling the government to assess the feasibility and viability of these switches. Arup services for this undertaking covers due diligence, techno-economic assessments, and market analysis. So this slide shows an example of what Arup's Singapore office has been working on in the solar front, covering technical, commercial, and financial review of technical interconnectors to other countries to import zero carbon electricity. Based on our assessment, we found that the first 3 switches do not get close to their NDC targets, let alone zero carbon. There are energy efficiency plans and strategies from various ministries in Singapore, and our works in hydrogen import considers how this might be implemented. Our assessment identifies the utilization of hydrogen as a way to meet their targets, and likely the most cost-effective. Larger interconnectors or carbon capture and storage are the alternatives, but they present significant technical and commercial challenges. So we found that aggressive use of hydrogen in massive application can pave the way to reaching not only the country's NDC targets, but also achieving net zero. Arup additionally conducted several studies to supplement the results of our simulations. This project aims to develop and test an urban food production master plan framework that will help cities scale urban agriculture and food production in a way that is sustainable and resilient. The framework developed could be used to set the context for cities around what needs to change from a physical policy and social perspective in order to increase the availability of local produced essential food. The framework is currently being tested and developed for Singapore, supporting its vision of 30 by 30, that is 30% of nutritional needs to be met locally by 2030. As Singapore works its way to net zero, the Philippine government has also started to work towards sustainability efforts. The following slides are the country's plan for carbon reduction and sustainability. So in order to boost decarbonization, the Philippine government reinforces the existing RE policies in a moratorium. These programs are the Renewable Portfolio Standards, or RPS, and the Green Energy Option Program, or GEOP, which was discussed earlier by Attorney Layug. These policies encourages commercial and residential end users to aid the decarbonization by procuring their electricity from renewable energy suppliers. Additionally, the implementation of the Green Energy Auction Program, or the GEAP, is much awaited by the country. The GEAP seeks to help the government hit a target of 35% renewable energy in the power generation mix by 2030. This program encourages the development of more renewable energy projects. So the recent push from the government to transition away from coal opens the doors of opportunities for renewable energy and decarbonization. The objectives of the December 2020 DOE Memorandum describes the following opportunities. Grid reliability, to ensure delivery of power to end users and enhance response to grid disturbance. And the memorandum urges power stakeholders to take advantage of this objective. Flexibility, recognizing the need for fast-acting power plants that will provide either additional supply or ancillary services to the grid. Sustainability, this promotes utilization of indigenous and new renewable energy sources to reduce the country's dependence on imported fuel. And other technologies are cited as smart grid systems, nuclear power, and hydrogen. So as for the transport system plans of the government, this will be discussed by our team in the transport sector. We encourage everyone in this session to join later today at 2 p.m. for more information on our transport initiatives. Thank you. Please stay with us for a panel discussion and a Q&A session. Let's start this session with a question for Peter. So Peter, you showed some sobering numbers, but you also said you believe this decade would be the decade of renewables. Which renewable energy solutions do you think will dominate in the Asia Pacific region and specifically in the Philippines?
Yeah, okay. I think that's a very interesting question. The reason I say it's going to be the decade of renewables is because it has to be. I mean, if you look at the climate statistics I showed earlier, you know, we have no choice, to be honest. We have to change. We have to take ourselves away from this hydrocarbon-driven society, and we have to move into much cleaner forms of energy. So I do, and you can see it happening. You can see many of the governments that made those pledges have sort of left it until the last 9 years, but you can see they're now proactively pushing renewables in quite a strong way. And you saw that in some of the presentations earlier in places like the Philippines, the legislation that's being put in place. In terms of which ones you should adopt, I mean, you have to play to the country's strengths and the resources they have. So places along the equator, for instance, should be looking very much at sort of solar energy, and those that are sort of more north and facing sort of large ocean climates should be looking at sort of onshore and offshore wind, because those are the strongest resources that are available. In terms of the Philippines, I think they have a fairly good mix. Being on the Pacific coast, they have opportunities for wind and solar, hydro, so they have an abundance, I think, of resources. We are working on the offshore wind development plan at the moment with the World Bank, with our partner organization, BVG. And it does show that there are promising offshore wind sites in and around the country that would be viable for both fixed and floating solutions. So I'm quite optimistic about the Philippines. I do think they've got themselves on the right track. It's just now a question of implementation and finding the necessary support and financing from elsewhere around the globe.
Yes, that's very true. Thank you, Peter. We move on to the next question. This one's for Attorney Layug. What, in your view, would be the impact of the Philippine elections to the renewable energy targets?
Oh, a lot, Lynn. You know, unfortunately, we only have a 6-year term for any government.
Yes.
But we all know that when it comes to energy planning, we have to look far ahead, no? Not 6, not 7. Actually, it should be a 20-year energy plan.
Exactly.
I'm hoping, I think, of course, everyone knew in this administration There was a push for technology neutral. There was a push for nuclear. There was a push for LNG. Although the rules were issued, all the RE policy mechanisms were issued, there was unfortunately some double speak, because while the rules were in place, on the other hand, you need to be technology neutral in the competitive selection process. So it contradicts. So I'm hoping the next president and the next energy secretary will imbibe the real sense of using renewable energy as a default energy resource in the Philippines. We're not even talking about advocacy here anymore, because renewables now are even cheaper than the conventionals. It's no brainer. No, we should not be arguing whether it's RE or conventional. We're arguing for RE because it's now cheaper. So I'm hoping the next government will change its approach towards the energy market and then energy regulatory framework and implement a more renewable energy-based policy. It's not for the future. It should have been 10 years ago. So, we need to stay hopeful, of course, with the change in government.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for that answer, Attorney Layug. We now move to our next question. This one's for Ms. Ruth Briones. You clearly stated that the stated social and environmental benefits of municipal solid waste, and mentioned that waste to energy mentioned that we have 5 facilities in the country. Can you share something about the cost of implementing these projects and relative to other energy sources?
Well, as I mentioned a while ago, the biomass that we are operating now are mostly waste to energy facility. We use biomass because people are allergic to waste to energy, but all of these are agricultural waste. So, so instead of using waste to energy, we use biomass waste because according as to the feedstock, although the renewable energy law also mentioned what are the feedstock that are available for biomass, but what are being implemented now are really waste to energy. We just wanted not to use waste energy because a lot of people are so allergic with waste to energy world. And I've been actually that is waste to energy has been my project since the 1990s, and we experienced the worst of situation regarding implementing or putting out this project. So our first project was supposed to be, as I mentioned, the Montalban project, which I was a part of that, and also the Cebu project, which I was also a part of that. In the next are all, these are 2 mixed waste projects. These are all purely municipal solid waste. The other project they're doing now are all waste to energy project, but all agricultural waste. So we started with 9 megawatt in San Jose, then implemented another project in some towns in Isabela. These are all waste to energy, but we use the word biomass as I did define in the RE law. So as to costing or the scalable thing, of course, we started with very small biomass because of the feedstock matter. And of course, as to biomass product installation, and it's very costly, especially as to technology that we're going to use. As to real waste to energy, there is a waste to energy proposal or bill in Congress that is now being hardly disputed. There are now 200 oppositors or issues, 200 people questioning the waste to energy bill in Senate.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for that, Ms. Briones. Appreciate the response. Attorney Layug, you seem to be the favorite for today. So we have another one for you. We have one of the highest electricity costs in Asia. Will these targets increase the energy costs further for consumers? What do you think?
Actually, it's on the contrary, Lynn. No? With the increase in targets, we will reduce our electricity rates. For the last, ever since we implemented the FIT program in 2012, and all the installation of these RE plants, about 1,400 megawatts, not too many people know, and we've been pushing for this, for the government to publish it, that we actually save consumers at least 9 centavos per kilowatt hour. Because all these RE plants under FIT system displace the more expensive diesel plants in the energy mix. So that resulted in about 40 billion pesos of savings to the consumers. Now, you can imagine these are FIT plants under those old FIT rates, where solar was at 9.68, wind was at 7 peso level, and biomass at 5 pesos. But with the current rates that we are seeing now, the power supply agreements with renewables, solar farms in particular, the rates are now down to 3 pesos 50 centavos per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
So you can imagine if we have more RE in the system, we will reduce our electricity cost. And please note as well, because as we all know, RE is cheap and free in the Philippines, we will not be subject to the fluctuating oil and coal prices in the market. We are now seeing that. Everyone's complaining about the 65 peso per liter of oil. That will also affect our electricity rates because of the diesel gensets in the Philippines. So quite the opposite. We put in more RE, our electricity rates should come down.
Is that us or? Okay. Thank you for that, Attorney Layug. Just a personal question. Sorry, sorry guys to interrupt the session, but will the impact of lowering the cost per kilowatt hour from renewable energy be felt by end users once the coal reduction is done? Or because I think as of the moment, I'm not feeling that on a personal standpoint.
Not at this time, Lynn. Based on the data I presented to you, coal is at 50%.
Yes.
And you all know coal prices are going up, right? You've seen how much coal is now in the international market. No? That will impact us on the electricity rate side. No?
Okay.
And renewables went down to 20%.
Yes.
How did that happen? We went the opposite way. And that's so sad, right? For the Philippines. We, who have a lot of lawyers who wrote all these laws and rules and regulations, we went the opposite way. And that's so sad. There has to be a change in mindset. And the government needs to declare that we prefer renewables so that more people will build renewable energy power plants.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Attorney. Appreciate the response. Our next question would be for Prachi. So we have low carbon energy sources like solar, hydro, and wind. They are also sensitive to changes in climate. If we rely on this in the future to limit climate, can we still be assured of a stable supply? And how much would climate proofing the energy supply chain cost? Will it be affordable for countries like the Philippines or probably emerging markets?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a valid point. But decarbonization, bringing variable renewable energy sources into the grid definitely is a challenge. But I think it's an opportunity as well to invest in for example smart grids that could potentially enhance resilience and flexibility into the system. invest in technologies, emerging technologies such as storage technologies. So when the sun, I think it'll be about managing the different supply mixes. So we have to diversify our supply mix, not just rely only on solar, only on wind. I think it will be a diversification of the supply mixes, and managing how we integrate these sources to the grid, and what time during the day do we use storage. So is it during the peak hours, or once, let's say, there is an outage because of any event. So do we first use those microgrids, or do we use storage first? Really depends on how long that outage will be. So I think with the penetration of more cleaner sources, what will really matter is their integration with the grid, and how flexible the grid is with respect to how do we ramp up, how do we ramp down, and then how do we stabilize the voltage stabilization, the frequency stabilization with given the higher levels of distributed energy. And in terms of costs, I think different countries have while building resilience as a part of their climate plans, have definitely considered costs as a part of their strategy. But there have been examples when actually investing in resilience is far more cost effective than managing the damage post the events. So I think there are different innovative financing mechanisms that can be put into place, even for countries that are still developing their infrastructure, so that it's cost effective for the end user as well.
Yes, yes, indeed. Well, thank you so much for your response, Prachi. Appreciate the response. Being conscious of time, we will have one last question to respond to, and this will be for Thomas. So the question is, will aggressive and massive application of hydrogen be feasible for the Philippines? And what steps can the country take to make that possible?
Thanks, Lynn. An interesting question. I guess it depends on how the price of hydrogen changes over time. At the moment, hydrogen is more expensive than natural gas, and so it's a question of when that might happen. I guess very large scale renewable energy prices have been coming down for a long time. As electrolyzer manufacturing increases, we can imagine the price of hydrogen falling, and so I guess it is at that point that the Philippines could feasibly make a conversion from any of its gas infrastructure. I guess the key thing to think about in the interim to allow that conversion has really got to be around how that conversion will happen, ensuring that plant that is constructed, LNG to power infrastructure is built in a way that is able to make that conversion to hydrogen. Hydrogen is a different fuel. It's been carried in pipelines for a long time. In Singapore, for example, we have a town's gas network that is 50% hydrogen, but it has a lower energy density and a much higher flame speed, which means that the infrastructure does have to be adapted. So having it ready for that adaptation, I think, is going to be the key. But at the moment, I would say the conversion to LNG to power and a move away from coal and towards renewable energy would be the priority for the Philippines, with a long-term view to hydrogen as the price falls.
Yes, indeed. Okay, I think that's the last for our Q&A. Thank you so much, everyone. So I would like to call on Peter for our closing remarks.
Okay, thank you very much, Lynn. I think it's the key messages that I sort of gained from this seminar has really been that the time to act is now, that renewables are now more cost effective. And I think that's really been the key. I mentioned at the beginning the pessimism over the last 6 years, but really it's the fact that renewables have come down to parity with other fuels that, as Jay said, it's a no-brainer. We need to be moving into renewables. So thank you very much. I'd just like to thank everyone for joining the session today. I think it's been really interesting. Special thanks to our speakers as well for taking their time to share their expertise with us. Just to let you know, if you missed anything, we will upload the recording onto our event webpage. So if you want to recap on anything, then please feel free to do so. And we'd also like to invite you to our other webinar this afternoon from 2 to 3 p.m. Hong Kong or Philippines time. This will be looking at the sort of transport sector and the sustainability issues that surround that. So you can find more about the speakers and the remaining sessions on our event webpage. So that's it for me, and thank you very much for attending today, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.